Everyone. Sorry. Well, in case you don't know me, I'm Carly. I'm president of the Wildlife Aquatics Zoo Exotics Club for the GVM program. And we're super excited for this event with the Center of Animals and Public Policy, and really eager to hear from Ginny and all of the amazing work she does for such awesome animals.
Welcome everyone to one of the Center for Animals and Public Policy's Animal Matters series. This is also co-sponsored by WAZE and by the Tufts Elephant Conservation Alliance. So we are fortunate this morning to have Ginny Colwell with us. Ginny's a wildlife conservationist who co-manages Elephant Aware's Masai Mara Elephant Conservation Project in southern Kenya with her family and a team of Masai rangers. Since 2011, Colwell's been a member of the team studying elephant behavior with the team started by Dr. Joyce Poole, the legendary elephant behaviorist at the University of Cambridge. She also works with the Maasai community to prevent wildlife conflict and to encourage community participation in wildlife conflicts and wildlife conservation. To this end, they sponsor programs for women and girls to help educate them and supply them with the tools and equipment they need to improve their daily lives. And in exchange, the Maasai community members are actively involved in conservation efforts as they understand the various benefits in preserving wildlife and their natural heritage. Ginny's conservation work includes training rangers to identify elephants for census purposes, to alert veterinary services should animals be injured or trapped, and other skills for their work safeguarding elephants. Ginny was born in Kenya, educated in Nairobi, and often travels to Europe and to the US to raise awareness about conservation for elephants. So thank you for joining us today.
Hello, hope you can all hear me. My name is Ginny and I am from Kenya, where I was born and raised. Our project is called Elephant Aware, and it was founded by my parents in 2008. I have lived in Kenya all my life, and I've had the privilege of growing up with species like elephants, incredible creatures. We live in a camp in tents, and in my childhood, my parents wanted us to spend as much time in the wilderness as possible. And quite often we would have elephants, lions, giraffes, snakes, all manner of species just beyond the thin wall of canvas. But when I was young, interestingly, I was terrified of elephants between the age of about 3 and 6 years old. This was not very ideal for our lifestyle because we would see elephants almost every day. But I got over this fear and it turned into fascination with elephants, which has continued to this day. There is an elephant eating a small tree, as you can see, and behind the elephant is my tent where I live. And our team of 25, including my family, my parents, and our rangers, all live in a camp in tents like this, inside the Masai Mara ecosystem, which is in Kenya. And we live specifically just south of Nairobi. Our camp is about here in the Masai Mara ecosystem on the border with the world famous Serengeti. And this is where our work takes place every day, all year round, where our team is based here. I would like to start off by talking a little bit about elephants. You probably know already some of this information, but male elephants are twice the size of females when they're adults. And females will remain together in their family herds with their female relatives all their lives. and males will become independent at about the age of 14. At this point, they will move away from their family herds and usually spend time with other males, older males, whom they will learn a great deal from. At some point, the males will go into a sexual period known as muss, which can last from a few weeks to a few months. During this time, they can be aggressive, their testosterone is heightened, but that's not always the case. Elephants are very much individuals and they have different personalities. I will be talking about individual elephants who have names and the ways that we use to differentiate different elephants is with their ears. The venation patterns on elephant ears are as unique as human thumbprints, but we also use notches, tears, lumps, bumps, and scars on elephants to differentiate them, as well as their tusks. This elephant has a broken tusk, as you can see. Oops, sorry. You look there, he's broken his right tusk. This elephant is named Osupat. This is a Maasai name, and he's named by the community members and the rangers, and they choose Maasai names most frequently because it establishes a connection where elephants are not just statistics, but they are individuals. This elephant we've known for many years, and he's quite iconic looking. If you can see all of the tears in his right ear. And these are some of the ways that we can tell the difference. They all look very different once you get to know them. Many might ask, why do elephants need protecting? Who would want to harm an elephant? Sadly, many humans harm elephants every year, every day, for multiple reasons. I'm sure you've all heard of elephant poaching and its devastating effect on the species. Elephant poaching used to be very bad in Kenya, and our team worked on the front lines. We saw graphic scenes like this almost on a daily basis. There was a misconception in the past where people believed that elephant tusks fell out at some point during their lives, and this is how they're harvested. Whereas in fact, 3/4 of an elephant's tusk is embedded in their skull. Therefore, there's no way to remove it without killing the elephant. In just 3 years, over 100,000 elephants were killed for their tusks. The poaching crisis took place between 2008 and 2016. And many more elephants lost their lives, including some who we knew personally. Thankfully, because of a huge concentrated effort from rangers in the field, teams like ours, projects like Elephant Aware, all the way to the top legislators and governments, poaching in Kenya has been reduced enormously, but it has been eclipsed by a new threat. Some of you may be familiar with these terms. Human-elephant conflict, human-wildlife conflict are essentially the same thing. And it happens when elephants or other species lose their natural habitat to human encroachment. Nowadays, humans and species like elephants live in closer proximity than ever before in history. And this can have deadly consequences on both sides for humans and elephants. In the Masai Mara ecosystem where we work, humans are having to accept that they live with elephants and have giants for neighbors. And elephants are having to adapt to the fact that they cannot escape humans. They live in a world where humans are everywhere. In this photo, elephants are peacefully walking past a Maasai homestead. And in most cases, elephants are not looking for trouble. They're just trying to live their lives in an increasingly humanized world. When we're talking about issues like human-elephant conflict or poaching, it's perhaps easier to look at elephants as statistics. But that numbers on a spreadsheet cannot possibly convey the individual suffering that takes place because of these issues. This is an elephant called Lenana, whom we knew in 2013. Our rangers who patrol every day and monitor elephants every day can immediately tell when an elephant isn't doing well, if it looks sick, not behaving normally due to years of experience. And when they found Lenana, they realized something was wrong. He was not moving very much, and we could see a gaping wound on his flank. In the Mara ecosystem, there is a mobile vet team, a veterinary team, sponsored by the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust and the Kenya Wildlife Service. And this incredible vet team works with us, and they are the only vet in the entire ecosystem. You can imagine every day they have an enormous number of cases. And we work closely with them. When we have any injured wildlife, they respond immediately, as they did with Lenana. And once he was immobilized, he was examined by the team, and they found a 15-inch spearhead embedded in his flank, about this big, which was removed. The wound was cleaned and flushed out. And once he was revived, it took him a few minutes to get up due to his weakened condition. But Lenana was on the mend. He was recuperating. We monitored him for a few weeks, during which time we saw some very interesting behavior. In this photo, he's resting his trunk on the roof of my car. And keep in mind, he is a completely wild elephant. At one point, he raised his leg and rested his foot on the bumper. Elephants are huge, and if he wanted to, he could have easily crushed the vehicle. But he was being gentle, despite being so horrifically attacked by a human. Sadly, Lenana was attacked again, and this time they killed him. It's very hard to lose an elephant whom we know individually, who has a name, who has a story. This is a tuskless matriarch named Nalakiti, whom we knew in 2017. While the rangers were on patrol, they came across her and her family, whom we've known for years. She's the matriarch, the leader of a large herd. But when we found her, she was only with her 3 calves. And once again, we knew something was wrong. She was emaciated and anemic. Once again, we called in the Mara mobile veterinary team to assist in treating Nalakiti. And after her first treatment, she seemed to be recovering. At one point, during the weeks in which we monitored her, she went to a mud hole to bathe herself, as elephants do. But due to her weakened condition, she could not get back up out of the mud. Our team spent over 10 hours together with the Mara veterinary team trying to get her up. You can see that she has ropes around her, and these were attached to vehicles where we attempted to pull her back up. When this photo was taken, obviously one person can't get an elephant back up, but it was symbolic of our effort. And she was so close to getting up on her feet again, but she collapsed. She simply didn't have the strength after what she had been through. During this time, once again, we had a front row seat to some truly amazing elephant behavior. The reasons why elephants are so iconic and special and draw fascination from humans for thousands of years is because they share many qualities that are similar to us. Elephants grieve. Elephants feel happiness and joy and sadness and anger. In this photo, I don't know if you can see, but there are two elephants lying down in this muddy swamp. And the mud was so deep that only her trunk was above it so that she could breathe. But this is Nalakiti lying down, and this is her eldest calf lying next to her. Her eldest calf was estimated to be about 12 years old, and her other calf was about 8. Her youngest was approximately 2 years old. And like human children, it seemed the eldest was the only one who fully comprehended what was happening. In this photo, the eldest calf was lying down next to her, perhaps seeking comfort for himself or perhaps giving comfort to his mother. Either way, he was very distressed. When Nalakiti died, her calves would not leave her side. In this photo, you can see these two. They appear to be comforting each other. And it's very important for elephants to grieve. Our team had to make the difficult decision. Do we continue our attempts to bring Nalakiti back onto her feet, which was traumatizing and torturous for her and her family? Or do we step away and give them the space they need to grieve and be together? So we chose the latter. We gave them their final moments in peace. And our team were very close on foot, but they didn't mind. They seemed to know why we were there. This is one of the most heartbreaking cases we ever experienced. And for me personally, it was invigorating and reinforced my commitment to our mission, which is to secure a future for elephants. In another incident, we found 2 young calves by themselves, far too young to be away from their mother. And immediately we suspected that they were orphans. Their mothers had been killed. This was during the very peak of the poaching crisis, so it was not a surprise. But what was surprising was that we found them in the company of male elephants. All of the elephants in this photo are males. There were no females. And this is not common for bull elephants. You don't normally see them with young. But they had taken these calves in, giving them protection when they had lost their families and their mothers. Not only had these massive bulls, who are normally alone or in the company of other males, taking in these calves and protecting them, but they were displaying behavior towards them that mothers normally display towards their young. One behavior we notice, which is referred to as sheltering, when a mother elephant shades her calf in the heat of the midday sun, and the calf will lie between her legs under her belly. These bulls were doing the same thing. When we first found them, there were only about 8 bulls. And after about 2 weeks, the number kept increasing every day until there were 15. And not only were these bulls displaying mothering behavior towards the calves, but they were taking turns. They were rotating their roles in looking after the calves. This is a behavior that had not been seen or recorded previously. Thankfully, these calves were no longer milk dependent, so they could survive. And we believe they have a good chance of surviving. They're both males, these calves. And we're curious to know that if they will spend the rest of their lives associated with these bulls, because males, they form lifelong friendships, much as females stay together in their herds. Because of our work and because of being based in the field every day, year round, our team get to witness a side of elephants that perhaps is not known well enough around the world. And these elephants, to us, are individuals. They're not just a population of elephants we protect. We know these elephants. They have names, they have stories, we know their history, we know their personalities. Much like humans, elephants can have good days and bad days. Some are more extroverts and some are introverts. We have an elephant who's very friendly and likes to come up to the vehicle and touch the vehicle and play with the antenna. This is another matriarch named Gina, whom we've known for a long time. And in February this year, we found Gina looking unwell. And upon closer inspection, we discovered that she had a gaping wound on her side near her mammary glands. This was one of 3 spear wounds that she had. Someone was obviously trying to kill her. But in this case, it was not poaching. She was a victim of human-elephant conflict. Quite often, when elephants are passing through areas of human settlement, perhaps they can go too close to someone's house, and the owner might feel threatened. Throwing a spear to chase the elephants away, not realizing the consequences of that simple action. We called in the Mara Mobile Veterinary Team, and as always, they responded quickly, despite having many cases they have to respond to every day. This is Dr. Ifantis, whom we work with, an incredible veterinarian, and his team. And normally in these operations, because they're wild, they have to be anesthetized. Normally they use anywhere between 3 and 20 milligrams of atropine, depending on the size and weight of the elephant. Once the elephant is immobilized, first of all, in this situation with a female, we have to move her family away. Once they're immobilized, it takes about 10 minutes usually, but they collapse very abruptly. And as you can imagine, this is quite alarming for her family. They don't know what's happened. So they rush around her and protect her. And there's no way the vet could get there with them there. It's too dangerous. So we have to move them away with the vehicle, and you'd be amazed at how loyal elephants are. And in real life and death situations, this is what happens. They will die for each other. They will protect each other. Luckily, we managed to move her herd away so that the vet team could access her safely. And there was no foreign object embedded in the wound, but it was cleaned out with antiseptics, and then which followed with antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, everything she needed to help her in aiding her recovery. This is a close-up of one of the wounds, one of 3. It was quite infected, and without intervention, Dr. Fantas said she would have died. I should mention now that I am personally not a veterinarian, but we work closely with this vet team. And we have so much respect for what they do and for how they work with our team. It's a team effort, treating an elephant. It requires many hands on deck. And these operations are intense. They're very intense, and they're very hard sometimes because you don't know which way it's going to go. You don't know what could happen. Will the elephant make it? Will someone get hurt? They require a lot of careful planning and strategic teamwork. A little bit about our project. Elephant Aware employs rangers from the local Maasai community. These rangers have lived in this area their entire lives. They've lived with wildlife their entire lives. And because the communities they work with are people they know, they grew up with them, they're friends, their families. Therefore, they already have a crucial connection. This is incredibly important in cases of human-elephant conflict, where it's our mission to ensure that elephants and people live together peacefully. I'm immensely proud of these rangers and our team, who work at all hours and are always ready to save lives. This photo was taken at night when the rangers had just visited an elderly Maasai widow because she had one cow left that was killed by an elephant. She was already from a poor family. She had no children, they're grown up and they've left to the home. Her last cow was killed and she had nothing. Elephants don't go looking for cows to kill. This usually happens in rare circumstances when they're forced together in close quarters. And it was during a rainstorm. The cows were returning home after going out to graze, and they ran into some elephants in thick woodland. So it's likely the cow that was killed ran into one of the elephants, and out of fear and feeling threatened, the elephant killed the cow by goring it with the tusk. And the woman was distraught. Her very livelihood, everything she had, was finished. So the rangers took her a food hamper to help her out. And a short number of days later, we managed, with support from friends here in the US, to get her another cow. These rangers went to the local market. They picked out the best cow, in their opinion. And it might seem like a simple gesture, but it was life-changing to her. She had been through a terrible negative experience with elephants. And had we not intervened, she might have viewed them as terrible, scary, negative creatures to have on her land who don't provide any benefit. But our intention was to turn this around so that going forward, she would view elephants as beneficial. Our team worked with the Mara Veterinary Unit quite often, at least a few times a month. And it's not only elephants who we work with them to treat, but all creatures that need help. In this case, this female zebra had a snare around her neck, which was suffocating her. And she also had a foal who was depending on her. This species of zebra, Burchell's or common plain zebra, are not endangered. But our ethos is that if an animal is in need and can be helped, it should be helped. This was an incident we had last year in, I believe it was May. We found a male elephant whom we know very well, and he was limping. His gait was not normal. We knew something was wrong. And when we looked through binoculars, we could see a small foreign object protruding out of his foot. And from experience, we knew this was an arrow. So Dr. Fantas responded with his team. And it was quite the procedure because he had to grapple with pliers to pull it out. An arrowhead is usually barbed, so it's not simple. You can't just pull it out. He had to dig around a little bit with the pliers And eventually, after a lot of effort, he got it out. You can imagine having something that nasty embedded in your foot, how painful that would have been. Elephants' feet are very sensitive in the first place. It's likely that someone just took a shot at him. Perhaps he was going too close to someone's home. And he was in a lot of pain. What's interesting is that we found him quite close to our camp. It's almost as if he was looking for help. And when we pulled up to him in the vehicle, he sort of propped his leg forward, almost as if showing us that he had an injury. Once the operation was done, it was a successful operation, thankfully. And Dr. Infantis gave him a very good prognosis. He should make a full recovery. One of the most difficult cases, one of the most difficult species to treat in the wild are giraffes. And quite often, because they're so large and yet so fragile, these operations can turn deadly for them. An example of what we have to do treating a giraffe. Unlike elephants, when giraffes are anesthetized, they can't be fully anesthetized. They have very high blood pressure. And they are partially awake during most of the operation. In this case, he had been darted with etorphine in a projectile syringe, but it requires a team of humans to run up to him with ropes and trip him over. Otherwise, he would just keep running and possibly break his neck. As you saw, the landing was not so graceful. They can injure themselves very badly. It's a tough operation. We have to get everything right. And once he was recumbent, the team were able to get to work. He had a spear wound on his shoulder, which was very septic. It had become badly infected. And he was in a condition where he couldn't run very far. Normally, when a giraffe that's strong and healthy is anesthetized, they can run for miles, and the team has to keep up. They can fall in a river, break their neck. They could trip over anything, a tree, a rock. This was his injury. If you look at the forceps, he's showing how deep the wound is, basically. A puncture wound is quite deep. But they probed the wound and debrided it and applied all the medication that was required. There was nothing in the wound, but due to its location, it was very bad. And despite best efforts, the operation was successful. He had to have assistance in getting up because he was so weak. And when giraffes get up, their head needs to be supported because they tend to swing their neck. This can result in injury. Unfortunately, this giraffe didn't make it. His wound was too far gone, basically. This is wound. You can see our team have to hold him down because he's not fully anesthetized. Giraffes have to be held down. And in this case, he was quite weak. It didn't take a lot of effort, but some giraffes will try and get up during the operation, and they have to be held down by a number of people. These are some of the reasons why giraffes are the hardest species to treat and to work with generally. They might seem huge and strong and tough, and they are, but they're also fragile. The spray, in case you're wondering, is, I believe, oxytetracycline. This was another incident we had last year. We found a female elephant with an extremely swollen vulva. We're not really sure what caused the injury, but we called in Dr. Jirogi, who examined the wound. It was very swollen, and he had to seep out a lot of infected liquid. And after examining the wound, it wasn't clear what caused it, but it's likely to have been a sharp object. So he drained it and sorry, it's not a very clear view, but during these operations, there are a lot of people bustling around and everyone's doing something. But the wound was cleaned out, and the rangers have been monitoring her since. She seems to be recovering. It's an unusual case. We've never had one like that. We've never found an injury like that. And we imagine it was extremely painful for her in such a sensitive area. The area where we work, it's called Siana. It's on the border of the world famous Masai Mara National Reserve. And this land is owned by the Maasai people. They're the landowners. And our team worked very closely with our community. When I mentioned earlier that I had the privilege of growing up with elephants, I also had the privilege of growing up with the Maasai people and having insight into their incredible and unique culture. It's been said in the past that the two best conservationists in Africa were the Maasai and the tsetse fly, which keeps people out of areas. Recently, there's been a trend in Kenya where people have, the Maasai traditionally, they had communal land. They didn't own individual parcels, but that has changed. There's been a subdivision of land, and now the community each own their own parcel, and many of them have chosen to fence their land. This wouldn't normally be a problem, except for the fact that much of this land encroaches on areas where wildlife are. In this case, fences are deadly to many species. This photo on the left, this was a female giraffe who found herself in fenced land, and she tripped over this fence and broke her neck. You can see her landing is very bad in a ditch. And despite trying to save her, we couldn't. The giraffe on the right of the screen tripped over a fence and got his leg caught in the wire. Thankfully, he was not injured otherwise. And after a lot of effort and untangling his foot, he got up and walked away. In this work, because we see so much sadness and traumatic incidents, any life saved is to be celebrated for us. Elephants are also affected by fences. And even though they're big and strong, they do get stuck in fences as well, especially babies, which can't climb over fences. We often, almost every day, get reports from the community saying they have elephants in their backyard. And not everyone wants elephants in their backyard. This is a typical scenario for us, where our team have to go into these situations and move elephants out. And this is much easier said than done. Safety is a priority, and we use a method called gentle persuasion. Because these elephants are familiar with us and they're so intelligent, they can differentiate people from their voices and smells. Many of them trust us. So we have to go in and push elephants with a vehicle, gently and patiently. We prefer this method as it's safer and we don't want anyone to get hurt, human or elephant. Sometimes these operations can take all day. Once we move them out, they will go back to the forest, safely away from people. Currently, we have a project that's ongoing where we're trying to secure a wildlife corridor, a migratory route that elephants use to get from where we are, which is about here, and the corridor in the yellow, within the yellow line, is where elephants use to get back and forth. But the problem, even though you can't see it on the map, is that this corridor is full of fences and houses and people. And elephants find themselves cut off from areas they would naturally go to. This creates and aggravates human-elephant conflict. Therefore, what we're trying to do is lease land within this corridor from the Maasai landowners who would benefit. And in return, they would move their fences to the edge of the corridor, giving space for elephants and other species to move through freely. Corridors are proven to reduce human-elephant conflict in many areas. And by focusing on elephants as the largest land mammal, they require the most space. But by focusing on this species, we also provide benefits to other species to live in areas where they have space, where they can live naturally and not have so many negative encounters with humans. When we think of elephants, for me personally and our team, this is how we envision them living wild and free in these amazing and incredible landscapes, such as the Masai Mara ecosystem, free of human pressures and constraints. Scenes like this remind us of why we do what we do every day. The Mara Mobile Veterinary Team do take volunteers, in case anyone is interested. And I can provide more information on that. I hope this was insightful and helpful to you. Thank you.
Do it for that. So. Okay. What is someone in the United States do on elephant wear?
Part of the reason why I'm here in the US is to spread awareness about what we do and why it's important to help elephants and save elephants. And I would say that if you're here in the US and you want to help, there are many ways you can do that. By supporting elephant aware, by telling your family and friends about what we do, and by learning more about why elephants are an important species and why they need to be saved for future generations. And when we talk about saving elephants, it's not just for the benefit of people in Kenya, but it's for the world. They are part of our global natural heritage.
How does stress from anesthesia and human interaction affect the outcomes for giraffes and other species getting veterinary care in the field?
Veterinary operations on these wild animals is very stressful and traumatic for them, which is why we only resort to that when it's completely necessary. For minor injuries that they can recover from naturally, we generally don't intervene. And because the drugs used are so strong and powerful, if we find an elephant and he is treated, we have to wait 3 weeks before any follow-up treatment takes place, if we find the elephant. And we have to keep up with them in this vast ecosystem because they're wild and they don't stay in the same place. But we try to resort to intervention as infrequently as possible.
I have a personally question back to the volunteer opportunities you mentioned. Is that something you could share with me that I could share with everyone who registered?
Yes, so I can get in touch with the Mara mobile vet team and ask them to provide an email address and anything else they require, and then I can pass that to you.
Okay.
Curious, when the veterinary team works with an elephant, and it may have family members or friends nearby, does that cause conflict? Do you have to worry about the other elephants nearby, or do they typically like give you guys space when working with?
In some cases, it can be very difficult. In one situation that I mentioned, the family rushed over to the elephant, which generally happens when they're anesthetized because they collapse so abruptly in the family. They might think the elephant's been killed. And we have to use vehicles and we have to make a lot of noise to push the elephants away. This is why it requires a team effort. Our team working with the vet team, and there's a lot of people involved, yeah.
What like type of volunteers does the vet team take? Like, do they prefer like people who are veterinarians or people who are not yet veterinarians?
I believe generally they take veterinary students and even qualified veterinarians who wish to have this experience and volunteer their time. And personally, I recommend it. I think it's an incredible experience.
They tend to serve like just wildlife, or are they part like serving the community for pets or like livestock animals, things like that? Or is there specialty or geared towards that?
So this vet team, they mostly dedicate their time to wildlife cases because they are one team in such a huge area. They have to focus on that. I think that takes up most of their time. And they probably would help out in a domestic case if necessary, but they're quite stretched as it is.
Question back.
It sounds like the rangers do community outreach. Have there been any other behavior change campaigns or campaigns to sort of decrease the human-animal conflicts?
Yes, so we have sort of a multifaceted approach to working with the community. The biggest thing is for them to see benefits from conservation. That's what we focus on. But the rangers also conduct conservation education in local schools, and we support girls' education as well. Girls from impoverished families to have access to education and avoid early childhood marriage. That's a big focus as well. And that has had a very positive response, as well as initiatives like this corridor that we're doing. Leasing land from landowners and them in return getting a very good passive income. And all of that, it creates a better attitude towards wildlife and seeing them as beneficial.
How does your group kind of spend most of their time? Are you observing elephants? Is there kind of science going on too, or?
So we're not really so focused on research at our project, but we work with people who are. For example, we work very closely with Dr. Joyce Poole, and she's taught me a lot of what I know, but we're based in the field all year round, and our team, the rangers, spend every day monitoring elephants, keeping up with different herds in the area to make sure that they're safe and that they're not running into people, and just a lot of hours in the field observing elephants.
Are there any opportunities to volunteer remotely, as by educating or helping with paperwork, data, etc.?
When you say remotely, do you mean from here in the US? Or
Yeah.
that's an interesting question. I might have to look into that and get back to you.
One other question too. How large is the elephant population in the Masai Mara?
So the Masai Mara ecosystem is on the Kenya side, and it borders on Tanzania right next to the Serengeti ecosystem. So we generally try to look at it as one ecosystem. And it's estimated that there are almost 4,000 elephants in that region. And in our area specifically, we tend to get 200 to 400 elephants at a time.
You mentioned that there's been a significant decline in poaching in Masai Mara.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
So the poaching was reduced, and not to be biased, but our team did contribute enormously to that, simply by being a deterrent to poachers, to people wanting to kill elephants. And that was because of elephant rangers on the ground and our team, and many like us across the country protecting elephants. But it also is attributed to huge efforts, awareness campaigns, and both in Kenya and around the world, to deter people from buying ivory. And yeah, there are many factors. Poaching still occurs in certain parts of Africa, but in Kenya, it's greatly reduced.
Any other questions?
Have people starting to see problems due to the climate change and there have been some droughts?
Yes, so Kenya is actually just coming out of a very severe drought that took place all of last year. Certain areas are more affected than others, such as the northern part of Kenya, where many species were affected. Elephants were dying, wildlife were dying, livestock, and we're starting to see more droughts than previously. And droughts are directly attributed, they're anthropogenic, usually because of a lot of human activity, creating changes in the landscape. So it is an issue, yes.
Masai Mara is a habitat pretty well protected, or is there pressure for other kinds of uses?
One of the pressures is the subdivision of land, where people are starting to own individual plots and parcels of land, and putting up fences in areas where wildlife live. And that's one of the biggest issues, is migratory routes being blocked for wildlife species. And the ecosystem itself is not pristine wilderness. It's interspersed with human settlements and all kinds of things. So we have to work around that.
Do you have an estimate of how much it would cost to pay the landowners to move their fences off of that corridor annually or on a 3-year basis if you were to complete the whole project?
I believe that the landowners, each landowner, so they have about 30 acres, each landowner. And what we're trying to do is encourage them to live mainly on 2 acres, which is outside the corridor, and the rest of the land is leased for the corridor. I have to get back to you on the costs because it's still very new. It's happening right now, and I think they're still working out some of those details.
Okay, so all that funding from volunteers and friends?
Yeah, so the funding for the corridor is coming from our project and also from donors and partners around the world.
Yeah.
If you have a poaching suspect in the area, what is your process in dealing with it?
Generally, it's illegal to poach any animal in Kenya. So if a poacher is caught and there's evidence to suggest that they've killed an animal illegally, they will be arrested. Our team work closely with the wildlife authorities in arresting poaching suspects and any other wrongdoers. But that's a good question, because when we're looking at human-elephant conflict, it's very different. It's not as simple as having people who are poachers and people who are not. It's people who have to share space with wildlife, and we have to look at it differently. It's much more complex.
Just wanted to keep the Zoom 1 hour, say goodbye to the Zoom audience for now. And thank you so much for talking to everyone.
Thank you so much for joining.